everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am back with another video, and today is going to be a reading wrap-up which I'm quite excited for the month of January. I read a lot of really good books in January and I'm very excited to talk about them. Starting off, the very first book that I read in 2026 is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I'm very happy that I've read this because I bought a box set of the cloth-bound Bronte sister novels, and this was the last one that I had to read, and I'm very happy now that I've read them all. I am also a little sad because besides some shorter stories, Emily Bronte doesn't have a full novel besides Wuthering Heights, so I'm a little sad that there's nothing more to read from her, but this was an extremely gripping book. So, to give a bit of a synopsis, we are following Mr. Lockwood, and he ends up taking up tenantry at Thrushcross Grange, and his landlord lives at Wuthering Heights a little above where he is at, and he ends up at Wuthering Heights and getting stuck there for the night due to weather. And he's very intrigued by the people living there. They seem very unhappy. There's sort of a lot of mystery surrounding who they are, and when he goes back to Thrushcross Grange, he ends up falling ill and is bedridden for a couple of weeks, and he ends up asking Ellen Dean, the house manager of where he's at, the history of Wuthering Heights. And Ellen Dean knows everything. Like, she is your lady if you want some drama about Wuthering Heights. She knows all the stuff. And so she ends up telling him this story of both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, the connections between the two, the love between the two, the hatred between the two, the obsessive love that happened between the people living in both houses. And it is just a novel that is very unputdownable because all of the characters are not very good people. I did like Ellen Dean. I didn't agree with everything she did, but I did overall like her. But all of the other characters a lot of them are extremely unlikable. A lot of the characters do not get a happy ending. Only a very few get a semi-happy ending. And this is just a very gripping book. The setting was very gothic, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading Wuthering Heights. Definitely recommend Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and I'm so happy that I started my year off with it. Then I read a bit of poetry because I thought I hadn't done that in a while and I wanted to incorporate some into my reading. And so I read Lord Byron's collected poems. And I must say, I really like the rhythm scheme that he uses throughout his poems. It is probably one of my favorites in poetry. I don't exactly remember what it's called. It's been a while since I studied poetry, but I do love his rhythm scheme, and I think his way with words is very romantic, and I especially love The Prisoner of Chillon. It was a really good poem, not a play, and yeah, he also has some full-length novels, which I am very interested in since I did really love his writing and just the way he manipulated words to express something completely new. I loved that. So I'm very happy that I read this, and I definitely want to read some of his more full-length novels. Then, one of my favorites of the month is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. I love this cover, and apparently, because I went to look online about maybe getting a replacement copy because this one has been torn a little. That is a lot of money. I did not realize it was like worth that much. I got this for $1 at a garage sale. But this book, is so beautiful. So we are following The Last Unicorn, and well, that's not a great way to start off the synopsis. We are following a unicorn who ends up starting to believe that she may be the last unicorn on Earth. So she ends up going on this quest to try and discover more of her kind, and it just sort of spirals out from there, this incredible adventure. And we also get some other characters like Schmendrick the magician and Molly Grew, who I loved so much as characters. But this book was just so beautifully well done, and I felt like under all the whimsical things happening, there was this underlying melancholy, sort of a mourning as that we the readers felt of magic leaving the world. And I think it was just so beautiful, and I just was so immersed in this world. And like I said, there was such a longing and a mourning for the magic and the beauty that no longer exists in our world, and who knows if it ever did. I think it did, but we'll never know, I guess. And I highly recommend if you like fantasy. It was quite sad, especially towards the end, but it was also just, I just loved it so much, and I definitely am going to read a lot more by this author. Then I picked up a bit of a book that was not random, but one I wasn't expecting to read, and I'm really glad I did, and that's Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This book felt like a slow descent into insanity, which I think is a very good description of this book because it's kind of what it is, but it was sort of like an accident that you can't look away from. Like, the whole time I was reading this, I had this overwhelming sense of eeriness and like uncomfortability, but I could not put it down for the life of me. It was so gripping. But in this story, we're following a bunch of British schoolboys who their plane ends up crash landing on this island, and they're all about 6 to 12, I think is the age range, maybe a little older. And at first they're like, oh my gosh, no adults, we're on a tropical island, this is great. But then it starts to descend into the baseness of humanity and human nature. And it was just such a creepy book because you're watching these younger kids start to lose their innocence and start to really fall into this like savageness, and it was just so gripping. I could not put this book down, and the themes that it portrayed were quite alarming. I mean, even the artwork in this book kind of looks like a horror book, because let me try and find one. Specifically this one, it's very creepy. Like, that looks like a horror book. That's like nightmare fuel. I mean, but I highly just recommend this book. If you want a fast-paced book that is just gonna leave you with the creepiest sense of emotion afterward, pick this book up, because I'm gonna have to reread this because the first read was very disturbing, and also it does have deckled edges. I have this really nice copy that I really love. I'm gonna have to reread this because it's just a book I cannot get out of my head. Then we have a big boy, my big book of the month, Brissinger by Christopher Paolini. This is the third book in the Inheritance cycle, and that is a high fantasy series mainly focusing on dragons that I am currently reading, and now I'm on the last book, which is kind of crazy, but I just love this series. Like, I cannot tell you why I love this series. Like, does it have the best world building I've ever read? Not really. Does it have the best characters or the most relatable, lifelike characters? Also not really. However, every time I pick up one of these books, I am just in this world. I check out from Earth and I'm in Alagasia. I don't know if that's how you say the world name, but this whole book series, it's just so comforting. Like, it's so easy to just slip into the perspective of these characters and be in this world, and I love that so much because I read these books so fast. Once I start it, I can't stop. I have to keep going. I have to see where the story goes. But this review might contain spoilers for the first book, so if you haven't read that yet, maybe just skip ahead. But in this book, we are just following the continued politics between within the rebellion, and also Eragon navigating his role to play in the rebellion. And one thing I loved is we got a lot more of Roran. Roran was a very prominent character throughout this whole book, and I do really like him as a character, so I'm glad we got more of him. And one thing I do love about Eragon as a character is that no matter how much war he goes through and how many awful situations he's put through, he never stops questioning the morality of killing in war, because, even though these people are on the other side, they're still just people, and a lot of them are not there of their own accord. They're being forced. And is it right to take their lives even though they are on the enemy side? And I love that he never ever stops questioning that. And he's always conflicted about it. And he's always just so appalled by the war. And I think that's a really beautiful thing within his character arc. And we also learned some very important things about the dragons specifically. I felt like we built a lot up. We went back and sort of did a deep dive into the lore of the dragons themselves, which is going to be very vital for the next book, because the 3 books that I've read so far, it's been like this slow building rhythm, and then we're going to have this crazy crescendo in the last book. I know we are. So I am really excited to read the final one. I really enjoyed this one. I really like this cover because the dragon on here is so grumpy. But I cannot wait to finish out this world, and that is definitely be a series I'm gonna have to reread. I read some more shorter stories, and you'll see why in a minute. But the first shorter story that I read was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I also have some tea in this nice little cup. It's so cute. It's got all these kitties in it. One's a business cat. I don't know, a cowboy cat maybe. I don't know. However, back to The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. So in this story, we are following a Cuban fisherman. His name is Santiago, and it has been 87 days since he has caught anything. And that's really bad, actually. And so he wakes up one morning and decides that he's going to go out quite beyond the current, so quite offshore, and he ends up hooking this giant merlin fish, and for 3 days and nights he is battling with this merlin fish over the sea, attempting to reel it in, which that is just insanity. I could never do that. A theme this book just really explored was perseverance and triumph in the face of extremely overwhelming obstacles, and also triumph and perseverance in the face of defeat, because Santiago does not win in this book. He ends up hooking the merlin fish, but then on his way to shore, the sharks eat the whole thing. So it's basically he spent those 3 days and nights battling with this giant fish, and he has nothing to show for that. So this book really did explore in Santiago triumph in the face of adversary, even though you know you've already lost, continuing to persevere. And it was very simplistic in the themes that it explored. And I definitely will have to read more from Ernest Hemingway, because this book was one that I did really like while reading it. So I'll definitely have to read more by him. Then we have Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. I need to get more Bronte's writing, because I don't have any more. But I think Anne Bronte is the most underrated out of all of the Bronte sisters. The Tenant of Vaudeville Hall is an incredible book, and so is this one. It is a bit of a shorter one, but in this we're following Agnes Grey. Her family has ended up in a very hard situation. They had invested a lot of money into these ships, and the ships ended up sinking, as they seem to do in these novels. And Agnes Grey, she thinks to herself, I could become a governess to help support my family. But one thing that is sort of an obstacle to that is her family, especially her mom and her sister, really view her as the baby of the family and not a full-grown adult, even though she is 19. But despite that, she ends up getting accepted to become a governess. And after that, we are just following her struggles with being a governess to these rich, bratty kids. And I loved Agnes Grey as a heroine. I loved being in her mind and seeing her thoughts. She was very perseverant and resilient, even though it was very hard for her, because the way that people were treating her as a governess was really, really rude. And the quote on the back really does sum up her character. It says, "Patience, firmness, and perseverance were my only weapons." So I loved her as a main character. I love the ending. I'm so happy with the ending. And I just love Anne Bronte's writing. And I don't know if she has more besides Agnes Grey and the Tenant of Bothwell Hall. I'll definitely have to take a look into that. The reason I was reading some shorter books is because I bought something in the mail and I was waiting for it to come, and I wanted to be able to read it immediately, and that's because I loved The Last Unicorn so much I bought The Way Home by Peter S. Beagle. I think this cover is so cute. There's Malka. And what's crazy, it was not listed like this, but it is a signed copy. It was not listed as a signed copy, so I was over the moon when I discovered that. However, this is two shorter novellas from the same world with some of the same characters. The first one is Two Hearts, and the second one is Suze. And in the first one, we are following Suze, and there has been a griffin eating the children in the village where she lives, and the king has sent soldiers and they have all been eaten. So she decides, I'm going to go directly to the king to ask for him specifically to come fight this griffin. She's only like 9 years old. And along the way, she ends up meeting Schmendrick and Molly Grew from the Last Unicorn book. And they all end up going to the king. And he does agree to come kill the griffin for her. And I feel like the first novel was very similar in style to The Last Unicorn as well, but it sort of served as a setup for the second book, because in the second book it is the one called Suze. It's her 17th birthday, and Molly Grew at the end of the first one told her that on her 17th birthday, if she whistles, someone will come to her. And on her 13th birthday, she does what Molly Grew says, and her sister ends up coming to her, and she didn't know she had a sister. It turns out her sister was taken by the Dreamies. They're fairies. They just call them Dreamies. And so she ends up going into Dreamland, where the Dreamies live, to bring her sister back. And she goes through incredibly hard things while in Fairyland. She does end up meeting Dalkaun, who is a person made out of stone, and I loved their relationship. The second book, I will say, didn't feel like it was part of the Last Unicorn world. It felt like it was its completely own thing, but I still did enjoy both novellas. Like I said, this cover is so pretty, but I really want to read more from Peter S. Beagle. I really want to read A Fine and Private Place by him. I am trying to find a copy somewhere. Another highlight of this month was The Scapegoat by Daphne du Maurier. No one ever talks about this book, but it is such a good book. I don't know why I feel like they always talk about The House on the Strand, Rebecca, Jamaica Inn. No one ever talks about The Scapegoat, and this is such a good book. So in this, we are following John, and he teaches French history and French language in England, and he ends up going on vacation to Paris, and John has always struggled with feeling like he's an outsider in society and in his life. He feels like he never belongs, and that's something he very much so struggles with, and he's sort of going to these different places in Paris seeking answers for his problem. But one night in a bar, he ends up meeting someone, a Frenchman, who looks the exact same as him. Like, there is no difference between how they look. And the Frenchman is like, let's hang out. This is crazy. Let's hang out together. Let's get some drinks together, go on a car ride together. And they end up stopping at this hotel. And when John wakes up in the morning, he's been drugged. And the Frenchman, Jean Degout, has taken his clothes, his wallet, his identity, his car, basically everything that makes John who he is on paper has been stolen by Jean Degout, who looks the exact same as him. And John is a bit at a loss of what to do. He's like, the police are never going to believe this. And Jean Degout's servant guy ends up coming and is like, are you ready to go home now? And John ends up playing along to pretending to be this other man. And so for an entire week, he goes home to Jean Degout's house and family and wife and kid, and ends up for an entire week pretending to be this man. And throughout that entire week, he really grows as a character, because it's sort of like he's getting what he wanted. He's finally fitting in, but there is also some very complicated relationships within this family. It's a very dysfunctionate family, as well as their business is going under. They have a glass foundry, and it is not profitable. It is going under, and John sort of takes up John Dagu's name and ends up not fixing, but starts to repair the relationship through this family. And it's like, he starts to feel as though he belongs here and this is who he could be. And this book was so good. I was never not entertained. Like, watching him pretending to be this other man talking to the family members who kind of hate him, it was very entertaining. This is a high recommend. I enjoyed my time with this book so much. I think this cover is very ugly, but the naked hardback is even worse, and I cannot for the life of me find a good replacement copy that is not the same exact book. Not the same exact cover is what I mean. High recommend The Scapegoat by Daphne du Maurier. It is a super witty book. It is super funny at certain times, and the ending is not what I would want, but exactly what the book needed, is how I will say that. So this was definitely a highlight of this month. We are getting down to the last couple of books I've read, but we have the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. I just had a little bit of a brain glitch there. You may remember I had 2 volumes of this. One was light blue. It was the same book, but in different colors. I was a doofus and didn't look, and I thought they were different collections of stories, but they're not. But I love the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. I finally read The Snow Queen. Very happy about that. Was not what I expected, but still really enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed The Marsh King's Daughter. That was a really good story. And then I watched the movie The Marsh King's Daughter that's based off a thriller that takes inspiration from the fairy tale. That is the genealogy of that movie, I believe, but a really good movie. Yeah, I can't really give a synopsis, but I just love his fairy tales specifically. Don't know what it is. And there are illustrations. The artwork is a little creepy at times. It's a little unnerving, I'd say. The artwork is, but I still really enjoyed this, and I need another collection of his. Last 2 books, and then we will be done, I promise. Oh, I have completely forgotten about my audiobook. Let's do the audiobook. So, the audiobook I read was Sunbolts, and what was her name? Intisar Khan, I think was her name. I will put up her name on screen. I audiobooked this towards the beginning of the month, so that's kind of why I'm a little spotty on the author's name. But this was a really good book. This is a series. There's 3 books out. I'm currently in the middle of the 2nd audiobook. But in this we are following Hitomi, and she is a street thief, and she is trying to join the Shadow Leagues, which is this underground rebellion that are trying to dethrone Black Flame. He's a mage, and it's supposed to be a council of mages where everyone gets a say, but Black Flame is starting to take over and turn it into a dictatorship under him. So the Shadow Leagues are attempting to prevent this, and Hitomi really wants to join this, and she finally gets the chance to be a part of it. In this mission, they're trying to save the Delgots, who are this political family who are about to be assassinated by Black Flame, and Hitomi is tasked with being a part of the rescue mission to get these people to safety, but a betrayal ends up happening and the mission goes horrendously wrong, and Hitomi ends up getting captured. And from there, we go on this crazy journey of Hitomi attempting to survive. And Hitomi is a promise is what they're called, and that is someone who just has a natural connection to magic around them instead of learning it. And her parents attempted to teach her, but both of them unfortunately passed away. And I love Hitomi as a character. She's an amazing character. She's so strong, and yet you get these sweet, very soft sides of her. And she is very caring about those around her, even those who have hurt her. And I love her as a character. And the second half of the audiobook I've already listened to has been really good so far. So I think this is going to be a really good series. But the author also has a different series, so I have a lot to read by this author, and I'm very excited for it. Okay, last 2, and then we're done. The first one being, I finished Dracula by Bram Stoker. I was about halfway through this book when I put it down for a bit, but I really enjoyed finishing this book up. I felt like in the beginning it was started out really strong and gripping, and you were like, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen? In the middle it did stall a little bit for me, but once I picked it up and sort of got past this middle part, it got really high stakes again, and I really enjoyed it. But this, of course, we are following Jonathan Harker in the beginning, and this is of course a story centered around vampires, specifically Count Dracula. And he is transacting business on behalf of his boss, and he's traveling to Transylvania to sort of complete this deal with Count Dracula, who is attempting to buy a house in London. I think that was the business part. It's been a bit since I read the first half, but he notices there are some very off things about Count Dracula as a person, and just like his house and his where he lives, his country in general. And the whole story, what was cool is it is told through magazine clippings, diaries, letters, journals. I love like that non-traditional narration style. I think it always adds a certain flavor to the story. But and then we get a couple different POVs after sort of assembling the dream team for fighting vampires. And I will say, if there was ever an apocalypse, I would want Dr. Van Helsing on my team, because he is 4-0 against vampires. He is a boss. I firmly believe Count Dracula would have got away with it if it weren't for him. So I would definitely want him on my team during the apocalypse. But this book was honestly a lot more fun than I thought. I thought it would be very sort of horror-ish and intense, which there were definitely some horrifying moments, but it was very fun and very like thrilling to read along as you're following this plan as they're trying to take down Count Dracula. I will say the middle part did lull a bit because you as the reader know that it's vampires, that's what's going on, but them as the characters, you know, you don't really think of vampires as the first possible solution to whatever question you're having. So the middle part did lull a little, and it also was really like showcasing Count Dracula's plan to get into London. But yeah, I had a really good time with this. I haven't read a lot of books with vampires. This might be the only book I've read with vampires, so I need to read more with vampires in it. But I really like this book, and I also really like this edition. I think it's very nice edition. And the last book that I read in January is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which this looks like a longer book, but it's not even 300 pages. I did have to use my pen to fill in the spine because the letters had faded. But I almost put this book down when I first started it, but I'm glad I persevered and finished it. This is a stream of conscious novel, so you are just in this person's head. You are in Mrs. Dalloway's head, and there is no real plot. Like, there is a loose premise, but there is no plot. And the thing is, Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway, she is an older lady and she's throwing this party. And I thought she would be the main character, but we spent a lot more time in other people's minds than hers specifically. And in this book, like I said, you are just in their heads. No plot. You're just listening to their innermost thoughts, and you will sometimes just randomly switch, and it's a little bit hard to tell when you have switched because there are no quotation marks for when they're thinking things, as well as there are no, what was the other one? There are no chapter breaks. That was a little rough. I don't love that in a book, but this book was very unique, I think, and it also explored some very hard topics because this is after World War I, and one of our characters is suffering from shell shock, and you know, they didn't really understand what that was after the First World War, so he's suffering pretty greatly. But this book was very interesting. I read it, I felt like I was never bored with it. It was always sort of, you just wanted to see where we would go with this. And like I said, there is no real plot to it. And I didn't love some of the characters. We were sort of in their minds, listening to their thoughts, but I do really want to read more by Virginia Woolf. I have one of her nonfiction essays, but I would love to read more novels by her. And I'm very glad that I read this one because I've had it for a little bit, and I also think this cover is really cute. I think this is a 1953 copy, and what is cool is it's very heavily annotated by whoever had it before me. I cannot read this person's handwriting because it is very beautiful cursive. Like, it is crispy, crisp cursive. I cannot read it. I've tried. But this was the last book I read this month, and I'm very excited to read more by this author. Well, that is my January wrap up. I read quite a lot of books this month. I just had a great time reading, and I hope you guys did too. And I cannot wait to see you all in another video, but that is it for now. So thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.